Welcome to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast here for Wednesday of this week. We're in the 16th week of Ordinary Time, and we're continuing through the book of Exodus. And of course, you're listening to us through Catholic Audio Media. We're seeing our numbers go up. And so we were kind of concerned how people will take the new format and stuff. It seems to be going well because we're seeing some good jumps, which is good. So that means that you are listening. Don't forget, and you'll hear this during the podcast, you can also hear previews of the program, which actually you can hear the program before it ends up on the podcast over at patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. And you can leave comments there as well that give us an idea of if you see that, ways you think that the program could be improved before we actually put it on the podcast and things like that. So you can do that if you want. Remember, if you sign up during the month of July and at another time, probably wouldn't do it right away, but another time I start to charge for that access and being able to make those comments, it would be something like $5 a month. But you, since you signed up as a foundational member, you will not have to pay the $5 a month. That's if we do that. But if you sign up in July, you won't have to. If we do it, you won't have to pay. So it'll be free for you no matter what. How's that way of putting it? Well, anyway, we are in the 16th week of Ordinary Time. We're still going through Exodus. We have a passage in today's reading, which I find one of the most humorous passages. It's only one sentence, and we'll get back to that. And it's actually, I don't think it was written like this, but today, a similar form of it is a common piece of humor, even was part of a 1960s TV show that had nothing to do with the book of Exodus. I'll talk about that as we go along. But in the meantime, today we're going to look at something powerful, as we always do. Now, we are in Exodus 16. So the Hebrews are continuing on their journey. They're also known as the Israelites, but they're on their journey from Egypt. They have yet to reach Mount Sinai. They have yet to receive the Ten Commandments. So they're still in that journey. And what's happening? They're complaining. Look at us. Here we are, and we're just starving here. Hello? We gonna fix this? And we were doing better off when we were in Egypt, which are words that you'll find in this passage that angers God to no end. Because, it's kind of like, you go through a really bad experience, and then many years later, you only remember the good times. You look at that and go, I only remember the good times. Oh, it was really cool. What do you mean it was really cool? You were starving to death back then. It's like, oh, we had such great times. You're talking to your grandparents or your parents, if you're around my age. Yeah, we had it tough, but there were some really great times. What do you mean? You had to use cardboard in your shoes because you couldn't afford new shoes. And that's what you had to do for soles of your shoes because you didn't have any soles in your shoes. Yeah, but there were good times back then. But you don't remember the bad times. And that's one of the things that they're going through here in the reading. Things were better. Things were better when we were in Egypt, remember? Well, you were slaves in Egypt. Yeah, but at least we had some decent food. But you were slaves in Egypt. You were complaining. I mean, I've been in these situations when people start complaining about something I changed, and then they're complaining again. Well, wait a minute. You were complaining last week because of X, Y, and Z. I fixed X, Y, and Z, and now you're complaining because you don't have X, Y, and Z. What is going on? So this is kind of that. It's like, well, you're complaining. You were complaining that you're slaves, and now you're saying things were better when you were slaves. Are you really serious? You really would rather make bricks, period, with or without straw, than be in the situation of on your way to the promised land. You would rather be doing that. Now, of course, that's not in the Bible, but I'm sure if I was in Moses' position, that's what I'd be saying. You were complaining a month ago, or how long ago it was, that you had to make bricks without straw. Now you're turning around and saying, yeah, but at least we had good Egyptian food back then. And I have no idea what the Egyptians eat. I'm sure good Egyptian food is really good, but I shouldn't say I've never been to an Egyptian restaurant, although I have never been to an Egyptian restaurant. But when I was in Rome, the one time I was in Rome, it was an Egyptian who was running the restaurant. Nice enough guy, but I think he saw me coming, and I don't mean that too much in a negative way. Obviously, it has a negative connotation, but because he later told me he was Egyptian. But I'm looking for a place to eat. Now, remember, I'm in Rome. They use euros. I don't know a euro from Monopoly money. I didn't have a clue. It was really a problem. And I think I spent a decent amount of money at this restaurant. And, like I said, the old saying, they saw me coming. But he said to me when I walked by the restaurant looking for a place to eat. And on my way back, I haven't eaten yet. And I walked by it again. And he's there and he stops me and says, "You walked by me." Me, in perfect English. Me, why don't you come into my restaurant? So I did come in, and I don't, if you know anything about euros, the meal came to somewhere in the vicinity of 80 euros, which I think was a lot of money at that time. Back then, that was a lot of money. Back then, $1 million was a lot of money. But I didn't know. I didn't know it from Monopoly money. So that's what, and he was Egyptian, but it was Italian food, I think. But here they are saying, well, no, we could have had Egyptian food. Yeah, as slaves, you could have Egyptian food. You're happy about that? And so they're complaining. So what happens is the Lord supplies them with food. He supplies them with quail, and he supplies them with what is later known as manna. So this manna in the desert, later known as manna, and so this manna in the desert, which becomes like an edible and not frozen form of frost in the morning, and that gave them what they needed to eat. Notice the Lord does not supply Egyptian food. He doesn't do that. He's training them for a new way of thinking, a new way of eating, and so he doesn't supply them with Egyptian food. He supplies them with what he has to offer, which is quail and then this frost. Now, this frost-like stuff, not frozen, but had the consistency of frost. And you're looking at that again in this section of the Bible, which is from Exodus 16. This area is actually 13 to 16. But the line, which is number 15, which is verse 15, which I really get a kick out of, is, "And they all said to one another, 'What is it?' For they did not know what it was." And I love that line. It's one of my favorite lines of, well, what is it? Why are you saying, what is it? Because we don't know what it is. Hello? It reminds me. See, I told you it's very similar to a joke. There are two forms of the joke. One of the forms I can tell you. The other one is very similar, but I can't tell you that form, not in this forum. Granted, it's a podcast. I don't have to follow certain rules, but I do have, in fact, a family audience here. So I will follow those rules. How many here who are listening have ever seen an episode of F Troop? And that was actually a kind of funny show. I mean, I was really young when it was on network TV, when it had its first run. But I enjoyed it. It was a really funny show. Larry Storch was on it, and you didn't get to see the full range of Larry Storch's comedy, which was intense. He was an extremely talented guy. I think he's still around. He's like close to 100, but I think he's still around. If he's not, he recently died, close to 100 years old. But Larry Storch was in it. Absolutely hysterical guy. But there was a Indian, or we should say Native American tribe nearby, and they were called the Hekawis because the Hekawis got lost looking for their camp, and they came upon, I think it was the fort, and they said to everyone, "Where the heck are we?" So that was how they got their name. Well, this is similar. They all said, "What is it?" Because they didn't know what it is. Why did you say that? Because we don't know what it is. Oh, okay. All right. So it's actually one of my favorite lines in the Bible. So this is where the Lord is feeding. And again, what we talked about the other day, he is answering their prayer, and they're angry with the Lord. Remember, we always describe that the worst sin in the Old Testament is idolatry. But right up there, along with the worst sin, is actually grumbling, complaining. Oh, look at this. And that's what they're doing. They're grumbling. And the Lord hates this. Would you look at this back when we were doing a lot better when we were living as slaves in Egypt? Wait a minute. You were slaves in Egypt. Do you get that part? Well, you were making brick without straw, and that was because you wanted to stop being slaves in Egypt, and the Pharaoh responded by forcing you to make brick without straw, and you said there is no way to make brick without straw. And you had to work harder, you had to do back-breaking work, and now you're saying you are better off than you are now, and this is the Lord saying, I don't like this. And this becomes a real problem between Israel and God. So they're complaining. And you always have to look at that. And always look at that in your own life, because the thing that the Lord is always asking us for is gratitude. Gratitude. Thanking God for the situation we have. And a lot of times we can complain, yeah, but things were better when, we were living up on, Podunk Street in Podunk, wherever. And you go, yeah, but you had no money on Podunk Street. You were making stone soup. Yeah, but seems like things were better. That's, again, pain has no memory. That's that whole thing. And the Lord says, no, I've given you all these things, and you're telling me you don't like them. Come on. We'll talk more about that on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast on your favorite podcast platform. We'll be right back. You can now leave a message for us, which we can air and discuss on this program. Just call 617-297-7452. That's 617-297-7452. 617-297-7452. Feel free to call, leave a comment, a question, or even feedback, and we may play it on the air. I can discuss your comment or question as well, so give that a try. 617-297-7452, 617-297-7452. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out. Patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. And don't forget that if you sign up for Patreon during the month of July, and I do charge later, I haven't decided whether I'm not going to charge. It all depends also on how many people sign up and if they're interested in that. Then if you sign up in the month of July and I do charge, you will still be considered a charter member and you will not have to pay. So consider that. But remember, if you sign up on Patreon, that means you get to read columns that are originally over on Substack, CatholicAudiomedia.com. CatholicAudiomedia.substack.com. And you can read them ahead of time, make comments. And you can also read or listen to all our radio shows ahead of time, our podcasts ahead of time, make comments. So keep that in mind. So anyway, we're looking at this reality. So what I'm saying, and St. Paul talks about this, God really loves gratitude. He loves people thanking him for what he's done. And you want to think about, now, one of the things to keep in mind that I can keep in mind is my mother was severely handicapped. I've told you that before. She got to a point she could only move one hand, not the arm, the hand. Her right hand. And if anyone called her a quadriplegic, I am not a quad. I can move a hand. And she was really serious about that. So one of the things that I can keep in mind is no matter what goes wrong, and sometimes I have to remember this, no matter what goes wrong, no matter how many difficulties I have, I can still move. My mother couldn't move. I mean, literally. She couldn't move at all, except for her right hand. She eventually, it worked its way down, but she eventually got that way, except for her right hand and from the neck up, and that's it. So keeping that in mind, this is an important thing. So here you have these people who are complaining. The Lord hates that. It's in the Old Testament many times. He hates grumbling. And that's from people complaining. Now, let me give you an example of this that you can see on YouTube plenty of times. You ever see these videos of someone who gets a brand new car, or even if it's not a brand new car, but it's brand new to them, and we'll say the parents give them a graduation present, and they get all upset because it's the wrong color, it's the wrong kind of car, it's not the right model of fancy car or whatever, and they get very angry. That's the way God is seeing how the Jews are, how the Israelites are. They're complaining. Israelites, not the Jews. They're complaining, but he freed them from slavery, which they asked him to do. So you see that. And so he's finding that obnoxious. And this is an important thing. Well, that's important for us to always be thankful of what the Lord is doing in our lives. And this is an important thing because we are in relationship with God. Now, it's not that we can say something that would offend God. It's not that God is offended because we didn't give the right kind of gratitude. No, it doesn't work that way. But it's that, you are showing to God your appreciation for how he answered your prayers. And always remember, as I said, God answers your prayers his way. I think one of my favorite stories, this is a favorite story, is I was dealing with someone who was struggling with money. He actually is often struggling with money, but he was struggling with money. And I said to him, I encouraged him to pray, see if the Lord could help him. And he needed a certain amount of money. Well, he got it. Except he says, but there's kind of this little detail in it that's kind of irritating. And I said, well, that's usually typical of when the Lord answers your prayer. Why? What's the little detail? He said, now remember, we live in the United States. He says, the money is Canadian. Oh, I said, that's typical of him. That is typical. He says, where can you cash a Canadian check? I don't know. Canada. That's all. And we went to the bank and, we can, but you can't, and a whole bit. And I said, that is typical. That's when you know that God answered your prayer, when there's a little hook that's in the middle of it. And true story. So the money, I looked for money, it came, except it was Canadian. That's typical. Reminds me of a completely different story, but, I could have gotten in big trouble for doing something that was considered very normal in this area of the country. Now, I don't know if it's as normal anymore. But for all my life, I guess right up until this moment, which was probably about 20 years ago, if you had some coins, of course, this is long before credit card. Well, it's not long before credit cards, but long before people were using, completely before Google Money and Apple Money and all this other stuff. And obviously COVID, where a lot of the use of, the non-use of cash really hit its pace. But this is when coins, and back then, if you had a Canadian coin, it would be considered an act of courtesy to accept it by a store owner. They wouldn't, oh, it's Canadian, I can't accept it. At least, I don't know if this is across the country, but clearly in New England. And remember, for those of you who don't live in New England, and especially for those of you who live in other parts of the world, Montreal is about an 8-hour drive, maybe even not even that, from where I am right now. It's roughly the same distance going by a sense of driving from here to Montreal as it is from here to Washington, D.C. So it's really not that far. And you can grab a bus and get up there in no time at all, in 8 hours. So Montreal isn't that far at all. And so Canada is very close. As you get more north in New England, you border Canada. New York borders Canada. As a matter of fact, you go to Niagara Falls. The falls have a Canadian side and an American side. So, yeah, we border Canada. Canada's right there and the whole bit. So Canadian coins would get mixed up with American coins. Not a lot of them, but you might have 4 quarters and one of them would be Canadian once in a while. And it was always a courtesy to accept the Canadian quarter. So I went to buy something from, I think it was like an ice cream or something like that. That's what I get. But nothing wrong with ice cream. But, as I say, one of the great things about radio is I only weigh 150 pounds. When I'm not on radio, I don't weigh 150 pounds. But I've lost a lot of weight. In any case, he was Polish. So he wasn't from the United States. I mean, maybe a citizen and stuff, but he was a Polish shopkeeper. And some other countries tend to be more strict on different rules, and because they're more strict in their own country. So, and I gave him, maybe exact change, but one of the coins was Canadian. And I didn't pick up on it, and I just happened to give it to him. And he looked at this and said, "I have no idea what this is, sir, but I have to return this to you." And again, he didn't understand that in this area of the country, at least back then, and all my life, right up until that moment, as far as I'm concerned, it was always considered a courtesy to accept Canadian coins. So I didn't fight with the guy because he didn't know it was Canadian. He didn't understand the custom. He was from Poland. I just realized that could have gone south very quickly. He could have turned around and said, "Wait a minute, you're trying to give me a counterfeit coin." Granted, if he called the police would turn around and say, "It's Canadian, get over it." But it just could have turned south because, again, people didn't understand the way things work. Well, understanding that, we want to be thankful to the Lord for all he does for us, but you might also turn around and say, but this isn't what I was looking for. Be thankful for it anyway. This is an important consideration because the Lord is doing something powerful. Now, the Israelites, also known as the Hebrews, at the time have no clue what their future is. They do not understand. They have no clue at this point, especially what the Lord is going to do through them over the centuries and over the millennia. They don't understand this. All they know is they were slaves. Now they are hungry in the desert, and they've lost hope because they chose not to hope in the Lord. It's like, and there's passages in the Bible like this. It's like, okay, he led you out of Egypt. He showed you these great plagues that basically showed the power of him over every god in Egypt. Remember that from Dennis Prager's Rational Bible series. He led you across the Red Sea. He conquered the Egyptian army. And now you're saying that he's going to let you starve to death in the desert? Are you kidding me? Where is your hope? And that's a powerful thing to keep in mind. And it's the same thing with us. What is the Lord going to do in our lives? Now, you may go through an absolute tragedy, the likes of which I don't even want to talk about. Do you want to, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to say anything about it. You could be going through a major, look at my mother. But you don't know what the Lord, and you could say, well, if God was God, why is this happening in my life? You don't know what the Lord is doing in your life. You don't know what he's going to do. You don't know what he's going to accomplish. And my mother went through some very difficult times. She used to say to me all the time, I must have been a really bad person. She actually expressed it a little differently, which we won't do here. I must have been a really bad person to have to suffer like this. And I used to say to her, that's not the way the Lord works. And another, when people come and explain to me why, for example, does a child get cancer? And I explain grace builds upon nature. The reason why a child gets cancer is because of some kind of natural reality that led to the child to get cancer, and that's it, because of some natural, combination of genetics and environment and everything else. But that's all nature. It's not that God gave the child cancer, but grace builds upon nature. So because of some natural realities in the environment of the person, maybe there was a genetic predisposition to cancer if they happen to be exposed to a certain chemical, but who's going to be able to prevent that? Who's going to be able to stop that? People can blame themselves till the cows come home for believing that they are the cause, but they're not. That's the reality. That's the way the world, the natural forces work. But God can work his grace through that, and grace builds upon nature. So why did the child get cancer? Because of some kind of natural reality in the environment and his genetics and something else. But that's the reality of the natural world, but God will work through that for some powerful realities. We'll be right back right after this. You can now leave a message for us, which we can air and discuss on this program. Just call 617-297-7452. That's 617-297-7452. 617-297-7452. Feel free to call, leave a comment, a question, or even feedback, and we may play it on the air. I can discuss your comment or question as well, so give that a try. 617-297-7452, 617-297-7452. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out. Patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back. And, by the way, don't forget on Patreon during the month of July, if you sign up for Patreon, and I decide to charge in the future, I may not do it right away. To give people access to be able to make comments about programs, so that maybe I want to redo the program based on your program, whatever the case may be. If I do choose to charge, you will not be charged if you sign up during the month of July. So just so you know. Well, in any case, this is the powerful reality of accepting a gift from the Lord, always, regardless of what happens. But know that when great tragedy happens, I know you never want to tell someone this, but the Lord is going to work through it. Remember, grace builds upon nature. And the grace can enter a situation that's caused by a problem in nature. Someone gets into a car accident. Why did that happen? Because of the laws of physics. Bottom line. And you say, well, could God have prevented that? Maybe. We assume that yes, but the reason why the accident happened was because of the laws of physics. And bottom line, that's it. God can work through that from those people who are affected by the accident. But the fact is, grace builds upon nature. It was a natural reality that caused the car accident. That's simple. Because we live in a natural world that's based on the laws of physics. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, but what God does happens over time, and you don't want to ever tell someone that God's going to do something with this. No, you don't ever want to tell someone that. But you do want to understand that God is working always through your life.